After Alicia proved herself as a hero by saving the town from Maynard's insects, she, along with Clint, Nellel, and Luna, travels to Haydn's capital with Nea's help. Meanwhile, Lady Tawara, upon receiving word that Dorel has sealed the devil beast King Clevatess and is heading toward the castle ruins for the furnace, decides to confront him head-on. Though on different paths, both Alicia's group and Lady Tawara find themselves aiming for the same target. Dorel, now revealed to have a demon beast king behind him. How will this fateful clash unfold? Let's find out. Alicia told Nea that Dorel was on top of the stone walls. Dorel himself calmed down for a moment and dispersed the smoke. Clint carefully observed him. Alicia then instructed Nea to turn right so they could approach Dorel, but Nea hesitated to follow and complained that she really didn't want to face Dorel like this. Because of this, Alicia forcefully pulled Nea's right arm, forcing her to steer the cart toward him. Nellel screamed in panic as Alicia and Nea fought for control of the flying cart they were riding. Dorel, wielding his blazing sacred treasure and demonic red eyes, began walking toward Tawara, who bravely faced him alongside her special unit of magic sword soldiers. Tawara ordered her special unit to ignore the other small fry and focus solely on stopping Dorel. According to her, the power of their magic swords ranked second only to sacred treasures, and if they overwhelmed Dorel with numbers, they could restrain him. At her cry of go, her magic sword soldiers charged. She told them that General Dorel was the only enemy they needed to defeat. Dorel readied his blade, and as the soldiers closed in, he unleashed an upward slash. The first 4 soldiers were flung backward by the sheer force of his attack, but the rest showed no fear and continued charging bravely. Their swords, however, had no effect on Dorel's armor. Dorel mocked them, calling them annoying pests. Tawara then ordered her special unit archers to aim at Dorel whenever he finished swinging his weapon and to use their special arrows tipped with manahydrite. The archers followed her tactic, releasing a volley of manahydrite arrows just as Dorel finished cutting down the charging magic sword soldiers. Seeing the arrows coming, Dorel couldn't dodge them all and was grazed on the right side of his face by one arrow. Enraged, he tapped into the power of his third eye. He hurled his sword forcefully toward Tawara, and at the same time, his body suddenly vanished. The magic sword soldiers were shocked by what they witnessed, and Tawara quickly deduced that Dorel had used magic. The soldiers formed a shield wall to protect the princess from the incoming flying sword. Suddenly, Dorel's body reappeared. He was flying alongside his sword. The soldiers were stunned, but before they could react, Dorel struck the shield wall with a massive swing, scattering Tawara's bodyguards. With the princess now defenseless, Dorel closed in and grabbed her by the neck with his left hand, choking her. The archers behind Tawara were powerless to help her, but fortunately, she still hadn't let go of the king's hammer in her right hand. Dorel praised Tawara's bravery and mocked her for thinking she had become part of the royal family simply by marrying into it. According to him, Tawara could never be a ruler. Even while being strangled, the princess admitted she knew that she had no trace of royal blood from her ancestors. Dorel agreed and said the only person fit to be king was the strongest who could inherit the bloodline. This, he said, was their absolute rule. When the direct royal line died out, a distant lineage would give birth to a child bearing tremendous power. This was the law of the world. Dorel had come here to destroy that law itself and tear destiny away from the world. Noticing something strange about Dorel's words, Tawara asked who he really was. Dorel replied that since she wasn't the king, she didn't need to know. Tawara struggled to breathe as his grip tightened around her neck. Even so, she focused on her goal, using the king's hammer to shatter Dorel's sacred treasure, the Black Dragon. The problem was that the hammer was in her right hand, while the Black Dragon was positioned toward her left. She knew that if she struck the Black Dragon with the king's hammer, it would not remain unscathed. Thankfully, Dorel seemed unaware of the hammer's power. Tawara believed that nullifying the Black Dragon's enhancements would give them a strong chance at victory. The problem was transferring the king's hammer from her right hand to her left without alerting Dorel. She needed just the smallest opening. But as that seemed unlikely, her soldiers could only watch helplessly as she began losing consciousness. Suddenly, Dorel turned his head, he sensed something approaching. It was the flying cart piloted by Alicia and Nay. Dorel recognized Alicia's face, familiar to him. Alicia shouted, "I've come for you, Dorel." Nay, meanwhile, was crying in terror, insisting she wasn't the bad guy. Princess Tawara was shocked to see the hero Alicia appear so unexpectedly. Dorel recognized Alicia as the daughter of the sword master he had slain years ago. Alicia confirmed it and declared she was here to avenge her father, Margot. Hearing this, Dorel turned to face Alicia, still choking Tawara with his left hand. But as Tawara held her ground, the black dragon shifted toward her right, giving her the opening she needed to reach it with the king's hammer. Seizing the moment, she gripped the hammer tightly and swung. Just as the strike is about to hit, Alicia and Nay's flying cart crashed into them. The explosive impact forced Dorel to release Tawara, sending the princess tumbling far away. Dorel ignored her, now focusing on his duel with Alicia, sword to sword, waterfall slicer versus the black dragon. He questioned why the daughter of the sword master had come to this battlefield after so long, declaring that this was no place for a spineless hero like her. Alicia rejected his taunt, saying a hero must appear at the time of world crisis. Their clashing swords produced sparks visible from afar. Meanwhile, soldiers rushed to help the princess, lifting her up after her fall. They wanted to retreat with her, but Tawara refused, her mind overwhelmed by questions about Alicia's survival after failing to slay Clevatess. She couldn't understand why Alicia was here or how she had survived. She couldn't believe there had been a survivor from the hero team sent to the Mountain of the Moon. But she reminded herself this wasn't what mattered now. What mattered was damaging the black dragon with the king's hammer. After Alicia's crash coincided with her strike, Tawara was unsure if she had landed the blow or not. Meanwhile, on a distant rooftop, Clen, Nellel, and Luna watched Alicia's fierce battle with Dorel. Nellel asked Clen if Alicia would be alright fighting alone. Clen replied that whether she would be alright or not no longer mattered. What mattered was that she was holding back Dorel and the Bullet army long enough for them to slip quietly deeper into Hidden Castle. Clen's real interest was the royal furnace, Dorel's true target, and therefore also the target of whoever was behind Dorel. His plan was to head there and investigate its true nature, which was why he had brought Luna along. Only someone with royal blood could break the seal on the furnace door. Luna silently wondered what Clen meant as he led the way, already knowing the location from before. At the entrance to the royal furnace, numerous royal guards stood watch. Fabio himself commanded them, ordering full alert. He said that as long as they held the furnace, Haydn would never fall. He redeployed all soldiers to this area for defense. Another officer protested that this would thin their defenses at the right mausoleum, but Fabio dismissed the concern. He said their late king and ancestors would understand this decision. Inwardly, Fabio worried. The mausoleum was supposed to host the prince's coronation. He knew Princess Tawara had long dreaded the premonition that this would never happen. But for now, only the furnace and mausoleum remained safe, and he resolved to protect the furnace at all costs. After giving orders, Fabio and his soldiers moved into position. Inside the vast hall lay the corpse of the late king, his head severed from his body by Clevatess. Nearby, Luna shuddered as he sensed a strange presence. They had reached the furnace's vicinity. Clen said their destination was just beyond the wall, but the wall was too high for him to climb in his current form, and circling around would take too long. He called Nellel, telling her to put down her baggage and hand Luna over so she could push the stone wall. Nellel obeyed but didn't understand why she had to push the wall. Clen said it was a good chance to test her strength. When he healed Nellel's body, he had given her strength to protect Luna, strength drawn from the condensed power of the slain troll. Being condensed, she should be even stronger than the troll. But because of her gentle nature, she rarely has a chance to use it, but explained that she could use it to her advantage by giving it her all at a moment's notice. Clen told her to push without thinking. Trusting him, Nellel placed her hands on the wall and heaved forward. She was shocked when she sent a giant stone brick flying far away, tumbling across rocks. Clen was disappointed she had only dislodged one brick, but Luna's eyes widened in awe. At the furnace entrance, royal guards were repositioning when an officer spotted the incoming projectile. They ran for cover, but rubble struck them with rocket-like force, sending them flying. Fabio was among the injured. Nella worried she had heard people screaming, but Clyn dismissed it as her imagination. Luna was thrilled as Clyn handed him back to Nella. Clyn casually remarked that he had always planned to clear away the pebbles anyway. The soldiers were still alive, but Fabio assumed the bullet army had arrived. Then, without warning, Fabio and all nearby soldiers felt themselves sinking, swallowed by shadows before they could react. Clyn had done this quickly and discreetly, ensuring Nella wouldn't notice. He then told her that, as expected, the furnace was unguarded. He pointed out the entrance based on memory, realizing this was where he had first met Luna. He admitted feeling uneasy that he had ended up swayed by the ramblings of a dying child. As they approached the gate, Clyn reflected that newborns couldn't choose when or where they were born, and neither could non-humans. A person's fate was determined by surrounding factors. Since one couldn't choose the beginning, what would happen after that? Could one truly choose what came next? Upon reaching the pedestal, Clyn took Luna's hand and pressed it to the inscriptions on the pedestal, declaring that he would now see what fate awaited Luna in life. Meanwhile, in the skies above Morel River, we see Gart in his bird-beast form flying over the area where the sphere created by General Dorel was located. He intentionally went there, wondering if Clevatess was truly inside this sphere. So he descended to the ground and transformed back into his human form to inspect it. Upon inspection, he noticed a figure inside the sphere that resembled Clevatess. He also sensed tremendous power radiating from within, but he couldn't understand why Clevatess wasn't even trying to break out. Gart wondered to himself if Clevatess might be asleep inside. He gave the sphere a quick, powerful kick, but upon testing it, it didn't even budge. It seemed to be made of an incredibly tough membrane. Furthermore, there was no sign that Clevatess would wake up from his kick. Then, he turned toward a voice that suddenly called out from behind him. A man asked if he was using magic, since he had just seen Gart descend from the sky. The man introduced himself as Commander Rod Royce of the Eslan army. He explained that a battle had just taken place here, and that he had just finished directing the rescue of their survivors. Gart wondered if this man speaking to him was one of the human soldiers who had fought here, but he decided it didn't matter who Rod was, so he simply kept walking. Rod stopped him and begged for a moment. Rod explained that while they were talking right now, General Dorel was already attacking Haydn's capital. Haydn didn't have the strength to stop the enemy forces. Someone needed to help stop Dorel. So Rod pleaded with Gart to take him to General Dorel. According to Rod, if he went by horseback, the bullet soldiers would only intercept him. He was hoping Gart could let him ride so they could travel through the skies. Gart replied that he had sharp eyes. He saw Rod challenge Dorel earlier and lose. So he asked Rod what exactly he planned to do, warning him that he'd only die if he went there. But even so, Rod remained insistent, saying he couldn't just sit by and watch while Haydn's royal furnace was stolen. He had a strong feeling that if that happened, something truly terrible would begin. Gart asked him what exactly he meant by terrible thing. Rod admitted he didn't know exactly what it was, but he was certain Bullet planned to use magic to change the world itself. Hearing this mention of magic worried Gart. He knew it was a bad sign and suspected it was the very thing Lady Zaftir had been concerned about. Rod begged once more, saying they had no time left. He needed Gart to take him to Hydralt. Gart thought deeply about whether he should also use a human to assist him in his own investigation and gathering of information, just as Clyn had done with Alicia, Nell, and Luna. After deciding, he agreed to Rod's request and introduced himself in turn, but on one condition. Rod asked what that condition was, and Gart explained that after he brought Rod to Hydralt, Rod must help him in return. Furthermore, Rod must never attempt to learn anything about Gart or his master. These were Gart's conditions, now 2 instead of 1. Rod asked what would happen if he broke these conditions. Gart's answer was simple. He would kill Rod no matter where in the world he was. Rod wasn't entirely comfortable with this, since he couldn't do anything that would betray Eslan or his king. But in the end, he accepted Gart's conditions, agreeing that Gart could kill him if he broke them. With the deal sealed, Gart told Rod to hold onto his legs, as he was about to use what he called magic. Rod didn't understand, so Gart explained that he used his 2 hands for flying, meaning Rod would have to cling to his legs. Rod processed this and eventually understood. Gart then performed a partial transformation, sprouting his winged arms. Rod asked what that was, and Gart simply told him to hurry up and grab on. Growing impatient with Rod's many questions, Gart suddenly took flight, forcing Rod to scramble and quickly grab onto one of his legs, holding his halberd in his other hand. And so, Gart took off into the skies with Rod clinging to him. Gart thought about how useful the term magic was. Whenever he used it, it easily convinced humans that the unusual things he did were simply magic. It showed just how unfamiliar humans were with these things. By the time the two had flown far from Morel River, we shift our view to Clen, who was carefully observing the entrance door of the royal furnace. He asked Nellel if she noticed anything that had changed, but Nellel replied that she didn't. Clen wondered aloud if the door should have opened when they placed a hand on the pedestal. Next, he tried seating Luna fully on the pedestal, but as Luna just sat there, clueless about what to do, he suddenly peed himself. Clen quickly had Nellel grab him so he could be cleaned up. Clen thought deeply about whether they were missing something, since they still couldn't open the furnace door. His next idea was to forcefully destroy the door and enter, though he wasn't sure if that was wise. Then he noticed something above, a heat haze rising from the tops of two towers. It wasn't smoke, which meant the towers themselves were radiating heat. So Clen entrusted Luna to Nellel, planning to attempt entry from above. After Nellel agreed, Clen prepared himself and performed a wall-to-wall rebound jump between the two towers, ascending toward the tops of the twin giant chimney towers. Clen noted that with the sheer heat emanating from within, any ordinary magical beast would be incinerated before reaching the bottom. Emphasis on the word ordinary. With that, he leapt and dropped down through the chimney tower. Meanwhile, at the furnace door, Nellel comforted Luna, trusting that Clen would return to them soon. But suddenly, someone approached from behind. When they turned to look, they were shocked. The figure was holding the severed head of the king, filling both Nellel and Luna with fear. Inside the royal furnace, pebbles fell from the hole above where Clen was expected to enter. But instead of Clen dropping down, only a single brick fell to the floor. Thanks to the shadow cast by the brick in the light from the surface, Clen used it to transport himself through the shadow, emerging inside. He had anticipated that his current form wouldn't survive the descent otherwise. Using stones and hiding in shadows midway had been the right call. Clen immediately noticed that, judging from the intense heat, the Haydenites must have used extraordinary stones in constructing the furnace. He understood this wasn't just an ordinary heat source. Though he wanted to peek inside, it was impossible to do so from the top with heat flowing upward. As he pondered his next move, he realized the furnace door was already open. He wondered when it had been left open. Stepping outside, he saw Nellel unconscious, and Luna was gone. Clen figured out that Luna wasn't the one who opened the door. Then, a voice from his right agreed with him. The speaker was holding Luna. When Clen looked, he saw that the figure holding Luna had no head, and in his other hand, he carried the severed head of the king, eyes wide open. Clen was shocked at first, but then smiled, remarking that he never expected to be greeted by a headless king. Switching back to Alicia and Dorel's duel, Alicia was sent flying by an explosion atop the stone wall. Landing on a rooftop, she immediately jumped backward, clearly on the defensive under the relentless assault of Dorel. Dorel praised her strong spirit, but insulted her lack of sword skill compared to her father. He called her daughter of the sword master, as he unleashed a heavy sword swing. Alicia managed to parry with the waterfall slicer, but the force still launched her backward through a house, crashing through to the first floor and out the other side. Amazingly, she remained standing. But Dorel immediately followed up with another charge, mocking her for calling herself a hero. Alicia was once again hurled across rooftops by his relentless attacks, eventually slamming into a war mammoth carrying bullet soldiers. She regained her balance as the soldiers stared in shock. Frustrated, Alicia slapped her face, struggling to deal with Dorel's overwhelming strength. Instinctively, she searched for the enemy, only to realize she couldn't find him. Then she spotted Dorel in the distance, moving away from her. She realized he was heading straight for the furnace, ignoring her entirely. Alicia wouldn't allow that. She immediately chased after him, using the war mammoth as a platform to launch herself forward at high speed. Back atop the stone wall, Dorel heard Tawara ordering her archers to support Alicia. Arrows rained toward Dorel, but he easily blocked them, dismissing them as annoying little flies. He mocked Tawara and her soldiers, saying their efforts were wasted. But Alisha caught up to him, shouting that their efforts weren't in vain. She unleashed her secret technique, Rising Dragon, for a rapid charge. Yet even with that speed, Dorel blocked it. Dorel told Alisha that he himself had taught this technique to her father, shocking her. Then Dorel drew another sword and immediately performed the true dragonfly Kamaitachi, dual-wielding blades to unleash countless consecutive slashes that sent razor-sharp projectiles flying. Alisha couldn't dodge or block them all and was struck repeatedly, the force of the attack even tearing apart sections of the stone wall it hit. Tawara shouted in deep concern as Alisha endured the assault. As Dorel landed on the ground, he was impressed to see Alisha still standing despite everything. He praised her for being the daughter of the sword master. After taking his attacks, all her limbs remained intact. Though struggling, Alicia's fighting spirit and anger still burned. She pointed her blade at Dorel and asked who her father truly was to him. Dorel explained that Alicia's father, Margot, had been the sword master. They were friends at the same school, both pursuing the path of the sword. They were rivals competing for the one and only title of hero. Alisha was shocked. She had never heard this story. So Dorel began recounting the past, telling her how he came to be known as the Dragon Slayer, and how Margot abandoned the path to becoming a hero. This story took place 25 years ago in the city of Esleburg, capital of Eslan. From the academy grounds, a tournament was underway, attended by both the King of Haydn and the King of Eslan. In the final match of this tournament, two fellow students would face each other. One was an assistant instructor, the other a younger disciple recognized as a genius. The assistant instructor was Dorel, competing in this challenge for the second time. He had been defeated previously by a Slaughter fighter, but now with more experience, he was regarded as the strongest. His opponent, Margot, was a young, rising man whose record was still undefeated, hailed as a once-in-a-millennium talent. The winner would be granted a sacred treasure, which the King of Haydn had spent 6 years creating. Before the match began, Dorel told Margot not to hold back. Margot replied, "Of course not. He couldn't afford to." And thus, their sword duel began. Moments later, the match concluded as the flag was raised. Margot stood smiling, his sword pointed at Dorel's bloodied face. The victory was declared in Margot's favor, and the crowd erupted into celebration. Dorel, seething in frustration, cursed under his breath and punched the ground. If only the tournament had been held 6 months earlier, he muttered, he would have surely won. Margot smiled and replied that perhaps that was true. Back then, he had indeed been weaker. But now, he had grown stronger, and it was all because of what Dorel had taught him. Had Dorel not been his master, he admitted, he never would have become this strong. Dorel, standing back up and irritated, said that hearing that didn't make him feel any better. He told Margot to just hurry up and claim the treasure, declaring that he was the hero now. Margot smiled and agreed. He turned to face the crowd, raising his sword high as the spectators cheered. As he walked away, the defeated Dorel thought to himself that his own path as a hero had come to an end. Margot, he realized, was a man truly loved by the sword, a genuine genius through and through. Margot knelt as he approached the king. The king called him by name and declared that, in both name and reality, he had become the strongest swordsman in Edthea. In the name of the King of Eslan, he bestowed upon him the title of Sword Master and granted him a family name. Margot expressed his deep gratitude for the honor given to him. From now on, he may call himself Margot Glenfall, the Sword Master. Furthermore, the King of Haydn rose and instructed him to stand. As Margot obeyed, the king stated that upon claiming the sword in his hand, he was to fulfill his duties as a hero, to battle magical beasts, protect the people, and ultimately defeat the 4 devil beast kings. He would expand the world in which humanity lived. When asked if he was ready, Margot answered that he was. The king then presented him with the treasure sword, and Margot gladly accepted it from his hands. Drawing the blade from its sheath, Margot raised it as a powerful aura emanated from it, leaving him in awe. He felt an overwhelming surge of power and realized that it was the true nature of Haydn's treasure. The king confirmed it, saying that yes, this was indeed the treasure. However, the sword was not yet complete. Its final touches, the king said, must be done by the hero himself. Curious, Margot asked what he meant by final touches. The king explained that the first creature slain by this sword would determine its completion. Unlike other magic swords, this treasure was a vessel for souls, gaining individuality and limitless strength by absorbing the souls of defeated monsters. Margot was advised to choose wisely what he struck down first, for it would largely determine the greatness of the hero he would become. Margot stared intently at the sword, deep in thought. Meanwhile, standing at a distance was Dorel. He quietly listened to everything the king had said. Several days later, Dorel was stunned to hear that Margot was planning to go on an expedition. They were speaking inside a bar when Margot explained that if he went alone into the land of magical beasts, he would be forced to draw his sword against creatures that weren't all that strong. Because of that, he would never be able to reach the level of a hero capable of challenging the Devil Beast Kings. That was why, he reasoned, the Dragon of the North was the best choice for him. Dorel was caught off guard when Margot mentioned he intended to fight the Dragon of the North. He questioned if he was out of his mind. The creature he was talking about was the minion of Vorden, the Devil Beast King of the North. Dorel's voice rose in disbelief, loud enough for people around them to look over in shock. Because of their reaction, Margot laughed and told his master, Dorel, that his voice was too loud. Dorel fell silent for a moment before saying that everyone was now wondering what creature Margot would choose as the first to fall to his hero's sword. Yet of all things, he couldn't believe Margot had chosen a dragon. Its habitat, after all, lay far beyond the treacherous isthmus, deep in the dragon snowfields. No one had ever seen what lay beyond those snowfields, because no hero who ventured there had ever returned. And yet, Margot had decided to go there, armed with an incomplete treasure. Margot confidently replied that this was precisely the point. In his view, only a magical beast of that caliber could prepare him to defeat a Devil Beast King. Dorel stood up in protest, stunned by what he was hearing. He asked if he seriously intended to challenge that legend, a legend no one had even come close to for over 1,000 years. Of course, Margot replied without hesitation. Dorel was left speechless. Margot then stood, saying that if they were decided, then they should start looking for companions. He knew Dorel was coming along as well. However, he still wasn't sure. In Dorel's mind, it was utter foolishness to challenge a Devil Beast King. At that time, he didn't even believe half of those so-called hero legends. And yet, he knew Margot's capabilities better than anyone else. There was something convincing about his back. If the legend were true, then perhaps Margot was the only person who could possibly achieve it. As they were leaving, someone accidentally bumped into Dorel. He apologized, and the cloaked figure replied that it was no problem. The stranger rang a small bell and wished that the blessings of magic would be with him on their journey. Dorel found it strange, but said nothing as the figure walked away. He asked Margot what that was about, and Margot was in disbelief. He didn't know. Those people, he explained, were wizards. Dorel was surprised and asked if he meant wizards, like in children's fairy tales. That's right, Margot answered. Unlike the legends of Haydn, in fairy tales, heroes learned magic from wizards and used it to perform miracles, like parting seas or splitting the earth. It's like a dream, but Margot explained that people were seriously trying to turn that dream into reality. Dorel wondered aloud if that was even possible, and Margot simply said, "Who knows?" For now, it seemed they hadn't gone beyond the realm of pharmacology. In any case, they were still far from being at a level where he could consider bringing them along on his journey. Eventually, as they set out, they realized the journey was far more grueling than they had imagined. Beyond the terrible weather conditions, the enemy they faced were no joke. There were 4 of them when the dragon finally appeared, and none of them were prepared for its overwhelming strength. The creature unleashed a blast toward them, forcing them to dodge frantically. Margot took the lead at the front, 2 of their companions held the middle, and Dorel stayed at the rear. The dragon closed in, and the middle pair was knocked back violently. Dorel shouted that it was flammable stomach acid. He urged them to not stand in front of it. But it was too late. Their companions were consumed by the flames. Dorel was horrified. 2 more had been lost. He warned Margot that this was no good. There were only 2 of them left to fight. He insisted that they retreat now. But Margot refused. If he turned back now, he said, he would never be able to return. He needed to defeat the enemy with that sword. He didn't want to compromise. It would be unfair to the comrades who had come this far alongside him. Dorel asked how he expected to accomplish such a feat. Margot then suggested that his master use the rising dragon technique on him. Dorel was stunned at the very idea, but Margot insisted that was the only way he could reach the dragon's height. Frustrated, Dorel warned him not to blame him if he died. Then he assumed his stance to execute the technique and commanded Margot to jump. Margot gave it everything he had to follow through with the strategy he had devised. He leapt into the air, and with the force of the rising dragon, soared even higher than the dragon itself, striking down at its wings. Using a single dragonfly slash, he swung his sword with immense force, causing the dragon to crash to the ground. Dorel was elated to see that he had succeeded. Margot slashed the dragon's massive wings, cutting through them with all his might. The dragon struggled fiercely, refusing to fall without a fight. The battle was intense beyond imagination. Even though it fell to the ground, the opponent was still a dragon. Its speed was unnatural and has destructive power. Margot only grew stronger with every swing of his sword and every attack he endured. Dorel, watching from a distance, struggled even to stand. But he was certain Margot could slay the beast. But at that very moment when he started to think that, something happened. The dragon, enraged, prepared another assault. Margot positioned himself to deliver his secret technique, the rising dragon, as a finishing blow. However, his foot landed on a hidden rock buried in the snow, dulling the execution of the technique. That momentary slip was all the dragon needed. It struck, hurling its stomach acid toward Margot. The attack severed his leg. Along with it, his chance at victory and the very path to becoming a hero was sent flying into the snow. Though the pain was unbearable, Margot could do nothing but accept what had happened. Before he completely collapsed, he hurled his sword toward his master, Dorel. The blade landed right at Dorel's feet, leaving him momentarily stunned. Dorel stood frozen in shock, while Margot managed a faint smile, as if entrusting the weapon to him. The severely wounded dragon roared in fury, thrashing about violently. Dorel dropped the twin swords he had been holding and, almost without realizing it, swung the treasure blade, the very sword entrusted to Margot. With a single, decisive strike, he cleaved through the massive dragon's head, killing it outright. Its head fell heavily to the ground, and Dorel stood in disbelief, astonished that he had actually slain it. Calling out to Margot, he proclaimed that he had achieved victory against the beast. But then, something strange began to happen. A surge of unfamiliar power coursed through him. Startled, Dorel glanced at the sword in his hands. Just as the king of Haiden had described, the blade was absorbing the soul of the fallen creature. Slowly, it rose skyward, drawing in the dragon's essence. Dorel's shock deepened as he realized the sheer magnitude of the power flowing into the weapon. As he stared at the blade, he understood this must truly be the divine treasure. An overwhelming presence loomed behind him. It's a massive dragon, much larger than the one he had defeated. Overcome by the creature's might, Dorel was left breathless, paralyzed by the sensation. Bewildered by the phenomenon, he questioned aloud what this presence was, only to hear, faintly, a voice saying he was carrying it. Back in the present, Dorel recounted that after their battle with the dragon, they were rescued by their surviving companions. They returned home, bringing Margot back with them on the brink of death. Alicia, being his daughter, might already know what happened to Margot after that event. And though Dorel had been hailed as the Dragon Slayer because of what transpired, his doubts never disappeared. In fact, those doubts had transformed into a firm belief that the hero legends were nothing but complete nonsense, a tool used to manipulate them. Crucial truths, he said, were deliberately erased, and impossible methods were spread among the people as fact. Only the succeeding kings of Haiden knew the real truth. At that moment, Crown Princess Tawara arrived as the two were speaking. She was in disbelief over what she heard. Alicia then asked if the information Dorel claimed had been erased was about magic. Dorel confirmed this. The secret regarding the origins of magic, he explained, was hidden within the furnace of Haiden. The whispering voice that had echoed within him since that day kept telling him the same thing. Alicia questioned him about the so-called whispering voice, but Dorel dismissed her inquiry and told her not to stand in his way. He then summoned the dead dragon using his sword and dark arts. The skeletal remains of the dragon appeared before them, shocking Oniii-Chan at the sight. Lady Tawara immediately recognized it from ancient texts, necromancy. She couldn't believe he had managed to recreate such a creature. A soldier behind her urged the princess to flee, while Dorel raised his sword toward Oniii-Chan and unleashed the dead dragon claw. The skeletal dragon swung its massive claw at her. As it struck, Dorel mounted the dragon and took flight. The impact shattered the ground beneath Oniii-Chan, sending bricks and rubble flying. She crashed hard onto the ground, the devastating blow leaving her badly injured. Lady Tawara screamed out in alarm, deeply worried for the hero's life. Soldiers rushed to evacuate the princess, urging her to retreat immediately, but she refused to abandon Oniii-Chan and ordered them to help her instead. Dorel glanced back at Oniii-Chan's condition before flying away atop the skeletal dragon. As they soared off into the distance, Oniii-Chan struggled to rise from beneath the heavy rubble that had buried her. Exhaustion and agony were etched across her face. Her arm and right leg had both been shattered. Even so, it was astounding that she was still alive, thanks to the blood of Clevatess flowing within her. Forcing herself upright, she muttered that she would never get used to this kind of pain. Looking up from where she stood, she realized that Dorel was already gone. Still, from their exchange earlier, she now had an idea about the mastermind Clevatess, whom she called Clev, had been seeking to uncover. Despite her injuries, she managed to leap upward, lifting herself with sheer willpower as she spoke to Clev. She repeatedly called out his name, asking if he could hear her, demanding an answer. Clev curtly told her to shut up. He could hear her just fine. Things had simply become more interesting on his end, he remarked. Her story could wait. What he was witnessing now was far more urgent. The headless king was attempting to throw his own grandchild into the furnace. Back with Oniii-Chan, she leapt toward the castle, gripping her sword tightly. Landing atop the structure, she immediately questioned Clen about what he had said regarding the headless king and the burning of Luna. She demanded to know what was happening, but Clen gave no reply. Someone suddenly called out to her, addressing her as Hero Oniii-Chan, a voice that surprised her. It turned out to be Crown Princess Tawara. Relieved, Tawara expressed her joy at seeing Oniii-Chan alive. Oniii-Chan, equally surprised, asked if she had returned alone. Tawara explained that she had escaped her people amidst the chaos and smoke because she desperately wanted to see Oniii-Chan. She had assumed Clevatess had killed them all. Tawara asked if anyone else had made it back. Oniii-Chan answered no. She was the only one. All the other heroes had been slain by Clevatess. I see, Tawara replied, though she admitted she was relieved that at least Oniii-Chan had survived. She explained that Hydrat's forces were struggling to contain Dorel's army inside the city. They stood no chance against Dorel, who wielded a treasure and commanded powerful magic. But with Oniii-Chan present, someone who also bore a treasure, they might finally subdue the monster. Of course, Oniii-Chan replied. She mentioned she also have another companion. Then, a sudden realization struck her, and she turned to Tawara. Before anything else, she said there was something she needed to tell her. Luna, meaning her child, was alive. Shocked, Tawara asked her to repeat it. Oniii-Chan explained that the baby, wrapped in cloth bearing the royal crest, was of pure royal blood. She was certain it was Tawara's child. Tawara could hardly believe what she was hearing. Tears welled in her eyes as she asked if it was true, that her child was still alive. She stepped closer and asked where the baby was. Oniii-Chan answered that he had been taken to the royal furnace. Tawara was stunned by the revelation. Oniii-Chan said she would explain more later, but right now, Dorel was also heading there, so she had to hurry. The princess stopped her. She insisted on coming along. Oniii-Chan was surprised by her resolve, warning her how dangerous it would be. Oniii-Chan promised that she would bring her child back, so Tawara should stay somewhere safe. But Tawara argued that there was no safe place left, not in this situation. Besides, she was a mother before she was crown princess. If it meant seeing her beloved child again, she would follow, no matter how perilous it became. Hearing those words, Oniii-Chan could only relent and agree to let her come. On the other side of the castle, Nello lay unconscious outside the furnace, while inside, Clen stood silently as the headless king held the infant. The king approached the blazing furnace, and its heavy doors closed on their own as he drew near. The baby, drenched in sweat from the searing heat, is in discomfort. Holding his own head in his left hand, the headless king began to speak, offering the child's flesh and blood to the lord of the furnace. In response, the furnace roared to life, belching intense heat that filled the chamber. Clen watched wordlessly, struggling to understand what the king intended. Spotting a loose stone at his feet, he kicked it toward the center of the furnace. The stone instantly combusted, turning to ash and vanishing. The sight made Clen pause in thought. "Wait," he muttered, as one of his hidden tails extended from his body. The tail slithered toward the king, coiling around the arm that held the child. The headless king turned, surprised. First of all, Clen asked if that really was how he's supposed to hold his own grandchild. It looks rather careless. He wondered if that was really his grandchild. The headless king turned toward him and affirmed it was his own grandchild, born with true royal blood. There was no doubt about it. Curious, Clen asked why. Why would the former king try to kill his own grandchild? Was it normal for people in this world to treat an infant's life like disposable trash? The king answered that it wasn't normal. He added that his body was not acting of his own will. Everything was dictated by the will of the furnace itself. Clen pressed further, demanding to know what he meant. The king explained, those who would become king are first reduced to ash within the furnace. From that ash, they are reborn as the new king. This was an ancient tradition. Typically, there was a naming ceremony where the person's true name would be inscribed into the furnace. From that moment onward, they could no longer defy its will. His public name, he revealed, was Hyderius, but his true name was Toth. It was this true name that had been engraved into the furnace. Yet, because of the furnace's influence, he was incapable of casting himself involuntarily. The furnace itself compelled his body to act. Realization struck Clen. So that was why the man could still move. Even without a head, he had been turned to ash and rebuilt by the furnace itself. The former king explained that his own son, the father of the infant, had taken his own life rather than be summoned to the furnace. Before he became king, he had confessed the truth to him. The old king had thought he was giving him a choice, but he now realized how wrong he had been. Fate in this land of Edthea was already decided the moment one was born. Even if one life ended, there would always be another chosen to replace it. The only way to break that curse was to end it completely. With that, he released the child, letting the infant fall into the roaring furnace below. The baby, innocent and unaware, was cast into the flames to burn. This, he claimed, was what the legend of the hero truly meant. But Clen did nothing to stop him. The king insisted that from the ashes, the child would rise again as king. Outside the damaged castle, Dorell arrived riding the skeletal dragon. A whisper echoed in his mind, and he responded aloud. He knew. What they needed to pull from the furnace was its very contents, so that they could destroy the world itself. Meanwhile, Alicia and the princess were already making their way there. Alicia asked the princess if she was all right, and Alicia replied that she was. From here on, she said, she would carry the princess on her back. She urged her to hold on tight, so she wouldn't fall. Tawara did as she was told and climbed onto her back. When Alicia asked which way led to the furnace, Tawara pointed it out. But Alicia didn't expect what happened next. Without warning, she leapt forward, bounding swiftly from rubble to rubble, closing in on Clen and the furnace before Dorell could arrive. As they moved, the princess said that she was not a king, nor did she know the truth. Yet she could never forget the words her lord had left her before he died. She always pondered what they meant. He had said that true heroes no longer existed, that the current heroes lacked the power to defeat the Devil Beast King. Why, she wondered, had he insisted so strongly on that? Why did he believe they were powerless to face it? In truth, throughout the entire 1,000-year record of history, there had never been anyone recorded to have defeated them. Even the records predating that era were unclear. If that was the case, what exactly was the true legend of the heroes? She wondered where the belief originated, that defeating the 4 Devil Beast Kings would open the world, and who it was that had first spread such a tale. His lord had never answered those questions. He had only given her a cold smile. It was possible that the former kings knew the truth behind it all. But if that were so, it meant they had sent the 13 heroes into battle knowing full well that they would never win. That, she thought, was utterly irresponsible. And even if there were reasons why this cycle could not be stopped, If they did not face the truth and correct what needed to be corrected, then they would only continue causing more harm, just as what was happening at that very moment. Countless lives would continue to be lost. Tawara said she did not want her child to become that kind of king. As they ran, Alicia remained silent, deep in thought. She couldn't fully understand the weight of such a burden, but she believed there was meaning in taking on that challenge, regardless of what the legend said. Even if the legend didn't exist, she was certain people would still face the challenge anyway. The longing for the unknown, the pursuit of strength, the insatiable human desire to improve, was something that could never be stopped. She admitted she still didn't know what truly defined a hero, but to her, it might simply be those who faced their destiny with a positive resolve. In fact, whether one was human or beast no longer mattered. It was that attitude that made them worthy of being called heroes by the people. From that perspective, Alicia thought, Dorel could never be called a hero. He had simply lost hope in the reality they lived in and sought only to destroy it. Alicia asserted that Dorel was the one who had killed her father, but more than that, he was now an enemy she had to defeat as a hero. That was the thought driving her now. Tawara commented on how strong Alicia was, but Alicia disagreed. She admitted she was weaker than Dorel, and far weaker still compared to the Devil Beast King. But that didn't mean she would give up on being a hero. In truth, she confessed, she had been on the verge of giving up too, but she had met someone who refused to let her do so. Surprised, the princess asked what kind of person that was. Alicia paused for a moment, thinking of Clen. To put it simply, he was someone she didn't want her to ever meet. Back at the furnace, Clen stood smiling after the king had thrown Luna into the flames. He asked the headless king what would happen now that the infant had turned to ash. The king glanced back at him. Shouldn't the child resurrect from the ashes? Clen asked what was going on. But then, it was revealed that he was holding Luna in his arms. He said it had to be the real one after all. He questioned whether a king can't be born from a shadow. The former king asked if he had switched the baby the moment he grabbed his arm. But Clen reminded him. It had been the king himself who admitted that this body was being moved in place of the one who could not leap willingly. He wondered what will happen to that body when that is no longer possible. He called him a mere puppet. He can easily imagine that it wouldn't work on him. The king glared at him furiously. Then, without warning, his own severed head was dropped, and the rest of his body collapsed into the furnace. Ashes to ashes, Clen muttered. He wondered if that body was burned away the moment it became useless. Now, he thought to himself, who would come to welcome the one next? Suddenly, the flames roared to life, engulfing the area in thick smoke. Yet Clen managed to shield himself and Luna by forming a sphere around them, a barrier that held back the inferno. He taunted the presence within the furnace, asking if it also planned to burn Luna alive with such flames. Did it not realize, he added, that the stronger the light, the more prominent the shadow it cast? He commanded it to surrender and reveal itself, calling it the Lord of the Furnace. The fire grew even larger, surging upward until the entire place erupted in an explosion visible from the outside. The sight shocked Dorel, who witnessed it from afar. Tawara and Alicia, too, were stunned at the spectacle. The blast had blown open the furnace lid, revealing the very place they had been searching for. Outside, Nello still lay unconscious, while Dorel remained frozen in disbelief at what had just occurred. A whisper urged him to hurry. Now that the furnace lid was open, they had to enter immediately. Without hesitation, the skeletal dragon dove through the smoke and into the furnace chamber. Alicia and Tawara noticed the movement. Alarm filled Tawara's face as thoughts of her child overtook her. Alicia pleaded with her to stay put. She would go herself to check on the situation. Leaving the princess behind, Alicia quickly sprang into action. She couldn't fathom why Clen would allow Luna to die, yet she also couldn't ignore Dorel, especially now that he was under the influence of the Northern Devil Beast King. And with Dorel already flying ahead, Alicia knew she had no chance of catching up to him in time. Someone suddenly passed overhead, causing Alicia to lose her balance momentarily. She looked up sharply and spotted the figure. Someone was calling out to Dorel as he approached. It was Rod, wielding the treasure weapon Snowflower. Rod declared that this time, he would make sure to stop him. He unleashed an ice javelin attack, thrusting his weapon into the skeletal dragon's body. From a distance, Tawara recognized him immediately, Commander Royce. Alicia, curious, wondered if the weapon she saw was also a treasure. High above, Gart hovered in the sky, having transported Rod to the battlefield. He announced that he would simply watch from afar for now, wishing Royce of Eslan the best in his efforts. Rod's strike drove deep into the dragon, sending the massive skeleton plummeting toward the ground. The impact shattered its bones into pieces, successfully halting its flight. Rod called out, asking how was that? But Dorel had already raised his sword, blocking the strike before it could deal serious damage. He retaliated with a powerful kick that launched Rod through the air. No matter how many times Rod struck, he said it's useless. Just then, Alicia arrived, intercepting Dorel's next strike with her own blade. The sight of her caught Dorel off guard, irritation flickering across his face. It was now 2 against 1. Grateful for the rescue, Rod asked Alicia if she was a hero. She confirmed it. She was the lone survivor among the 13 heroes. There wasn't time to explain in detail, she said, so she would get straight to the point. Rod agreed. They had no time for lengthy explanations. They introduced themselves to one another. Dorel stood ready, sword poised for battle. Rod asked if they were fighting together. Alicia answered probably, because otherwise, that man would be unbeatable. Both of them prepared their treasure weapons, ready to bring Dorel down. As the two of them took their stance, ready to charge, Dorel remarked on their decision to join forces. He boastfully said that if 2 wielders of sacred treasures were to face him, they might actually have a chance of fighting him. He added that it was true the 2 of them were among the top-tier sacred treasure bearers, but pointed out that it was pointless. After all, that ranking only applied among the current living races of this land. Afterward, he noted that against him right now, they stood no chance of winning, and as he said that, 2 more eyes opened on his forehead, releasing an ominous aura. The aura surged and engulfed his entire body. Rod was stunned at the sight of 2 additional eyes opening on his forehead, while Alicia shouted that his charge was coming. Dorel assumed his stance, and in an instant, he vanished from where he stood due to his overwhelming speed, reappearing behind Rod and Alicia, startling them both. Alicia shouted that Dorel was right behind them, prompting her and Rod to quickly turn around. They managed to turn and block Dorel's dual sword strike with their own weapons, but the power and impact behind his attack were so strong that they struggled to hold their ground. Despite their efforts, Dorel still managed to overpower them, sending both flying. As they were hurled into the air, Dorel didn't relent and followed up with another attack. He swiftly reached Alicia and thrust his black dragon sword toward her. Alicia tried to block with her stream splitter, but she couldn't parry the attack. It pierced her chest, making her scream in pain. Rod rushed in to assist, launching his own thrust toward Dorel, but the general easily dodged by ducking. Using the handle of his sword, Dorel parried Rod's spear aside, catching him off guard. Taking advantage of the opening, Dorel used the momentum of his parry to deliver a strike, sending Rod crashing into Alicia, both of them hitting the ground hard. Dorel didn't stop there. He quickly closed in on them again while the 2 struggled to catch their breath. Rod's face showed exhaustion, while Alicia coughed up blood from her wounds. Rod glanced toward the incoming Dorel, concern flashing in his eyes, but Alicia caught his attention, telling him to use his ice. She shouted for him to bring out the massive ice spear she was referring to, urging him to hurry. Rod immediately followed, pointing his snowflower toward the charging Dorel and using his ice javelin technique, creating a massive ice shard and launching it at him. Dorel easily dodged, scoffing as if to say there was no way such a large attack would hit him. As he continued his advance, Dorel noticed Alicia suddenly vanish from beside Rod, confusing him. Unbeknownst to him, Alicia had timed her movement to coincide with the flying ice shard, using it as cover. From behind Dorel, she leapt, shouting that she was there as she prepared her sword. Startled, Dorel turned toward her, and in that brief moment of distraction, Rod followed up with his ice jail technique, creating massive ice that ensnared one of the general's legs. Rod called out to Alicia, saying this was all the strength he had left, urging her to finish it, calling her hero. From above Dorel, Alicia unleashed her technique, Distant Rising Dragon. falling mountain, delivering a straight vertical slash that cut through Dorel from head to toe. His body was split cleanly in two. Oniii-Chan then shouted at him and asked how's that, while calling him a monster. As Dorel's body began to separate, Rod shouted in adrenaline, celebrating that they had finally defeated him. However, to their surprise, even in that state, Dorel managed to speak, commenting on Alicia's unconventional and bold attack, calling it exactly the kind of technique a sword master would conceive. Alicia's eyes widened in shock upon hearing him. The right half of Dorel's body started to fall, but before it could hit the ground, it suddenly turned entirely into blood, causing Alicia's eyes to widen further as she questioned if what she was seeing was devil blood. The remaining body of Dorel that was trapped in ice also turned into blood, which made Oniii-Chan remark in disbelief that his entire body was already made of devil blood. Rod then caught her attention and warned her of an incoming attack from her right. But the moment she turned, Dorel, or perhaps we could say the Black Dragon, was already flying toward her. She tried to lift her arm to block, but it was too late. The strike severed her entire wrist. The force behind that slash was so strong that even the massive ice monolith Rod had created was sliced apart. Alicia's hand, still gripping the stream splitter, flew off, and she screamed in pain from the wound she sustained. Rod, alarmed by her fall, barely managed to catch her. The sacred weapon landed beside Tawara, who, upon seeing it, shouted Alicia's name out of sheer panic. Cracks began forming across the ice monolith, and before long, its pieces came crashing to the ground. Rod quickly carried Oniii-Chan away from the danger, but in doing so, the stream splitter was left behind near the massive ice. Rod could do nothing but stare at it, the worry on his face unmistakable. Soon after, he saw Dorel ahead of them, gradually reforming into solid form. And when he emerged, his appearance had become fully monstrous. He now bore the wings of a demon, a bone dragon's head for his left arm, and in his right hand, he gripped the Black Dragon sword. With a menacing aura, he declared that effort and hope were meaningless, all of it futile when faced with the truth. He explained that, just as a fish could never become human no matter how hard it tried, they would never become true men. The reason for that, he said, was that they were simply not a species capable of becoming one in the first place. The undeniable truth, he continued, was that every species in Edthea could not use magic without stones, proof that they were inferior beings. Rod challenged his statement about them being an inferior species, while Oniii-Chan struggled in pain on the side. Dorel then added that the true human race, the species that once ruled the entire world, had long since disappeared, leaving behind the current humans and their legends. They were merely being manipulated, he said, both humans and magical beasts alike. To put an end to it, they had to destroy every last trace of the legends of the true men. As he said this, he unleashed a flame breath from the bone dragon head on his arm, spewing it relentlessly toward the two of them. Rod spun his spear rapidly to shield himself and Oniii-Chan from the flames. Dorel further declared that for this purpose, he did not care how many wars they would have to fight, or how many mountains of corpses they would have to stack. After hearing all of this through Alicia's body, Clevatess commented that now he understood, so that's what it was. He now realized that Vortian's goal had mostly become clear to him. He thought to himself that he had never seen those so-called true humans. He wondered if they had already disappeared before he inherited the throne of the Devil Beast King. If so, that only meant that the true humans had already vanished for over 1,000 years. He then spoke to Zaftir in his mind, telling her that it seemed she knew about this all along, yet never said anything to him, referring to her as Zafti. Afterward, the scene shifted to him and Luna, as he gazed at the Lord of the Furnace. He added to his previous words that even so, he never imagined something like this could be a remnant of the hero's legend. We were then shown what he was staring at inside the furnace's flames, a peculiar book with a lock and key bound by chains. Upon seeing its title, he called it the Book of Toa and commented that he didn't know why he was able to read it. It had only become visible after he used the eternal shadows to erase the light. Without that, he said the light and heat would have blinded him. He added that once its form became visible, the furnace itself disappeared. There was no doubt, he said, that this was the true identity of the so-called master of the furnace. A simple book had burned the king of Haiden to death, rebuilt him from ashes, and turned him into its own caretaker. He commented that it was completely incomprehensible and questioned if it could be another form of magic. He also questioned if this was the same reason Alicia once pointed a sword at him, and if this was why Luna had been fated to become ash. He wondered if this was also what led him to destroy the castle and consider the extermination of all human races. A smirk formed on his face as those thoughts crossed his mind, and soon after, he began laughing loudly, loud enough to wake the sleeping Luna in his arms. After letting out his laughter, he grew serious again and remarked inwardly that all of this was meaningless. The previous king had never said anything, but it was likely, he thought, that the position of Devil Beast King and the purpose of guarding that land were nothing more than a response to the pointless legends of a species that had already disappeared. He followed by saying that birth and destiny were irrelevant. From the start, they were meaningless. The world, he added, was gray. Afterward, his tone suddenly shifted, and words escaped his mouth. If the world was born from chaos, then perhaps so was he. He questioned himself, wondering whose words those were, and if they really came from him. He concluded that he must have simply been bored. Afterward, he looked at Luna differently than usual, a look that Luna seemed to sense, and he questioned why he was wandering around with that monkey child. He set Luna down and began walking away, prompting Luna to try calling out to him. He stated that he was done trying to eradicate humans, that he no longer cared about the Book of Toa, or the so-called true humans, and decided then and there to return to Moon Mountain. As Luna cried out after him, he added that he had hoped something might change, but it seemed nothing did. Before reaching the door to the furnace room, he snapped his fingers, causing the Book of Toa to drop to the ground, while Luna wailed from being left behind. Suddenly, Alicia's voice called out to him from the other side, shouting at him not to screw with her and asking if he was really going to give up here, leaving Rod confused by her sudden outburst. Clem commented in surprise that she was still alive, to which Alicia, clearly annoyed, shouted at him not to joke about that. Clem said that he now understood Doral and Vortian's objective and that he had seen their true identity. In fact, he claimed he had no reason to stop them. If they wanted to erase the traces of the hero, he said, then let them do what they wanted. Whatever happened to the human world in the process, he said, was none of his business. As he was about to add that Alicia should hurry and do something, Alicia shouted back that that wasn't what she was talking about. She pointed out that she was talking about Luna. She demanded to know if Clem had even looked Luna in the eyes, and if he would really call them gray. She then charged straight toward Doral, alarming Rod, and as she did, she shouted that she didn't care what a true human was supposed to be, didn't care about true heroes, or about being manipulated by old legends. She didn't stop charging as she screamed that there was no reason for those long-gone humans to call the people living today an inferior species. She urged Clem to look at Luna's eyes and asked if those were the eyes of an inferior species. Clem turned to Luna upon hearing this and saw him struggling and crying, trying to reach him. Despite the difficulty, Luna forced himself to stand, and, finally, managed to do so on two legs while crying. The pitiful sight of Luna standing, his tiny legs trembling, tears welling up in his wide eyes, and his face flushed with strain, showed just how desperately he was trying to move forward. Soon after, he began walking toward Clem. As this happened, Alicia shouted at him to look at Luna's eyes and asked if didn't he want to see them grow. While Alicia charged forward, Doral shouted, asking how she intended to fight him without a sacred treasure. After saying that, he quickly flew toward Alicia, who was trying to run toward her severed hand that was holding the stream splitter. While running, Alicia kept shouting at Clem to answer her question about what color Luna's eyes were. Clem, on the other hand, picked Luna up and raised him into the air, looking straight into his eyes. As he stared into the sparkling eyes of the baby, he answered Alicia that they were light purple. We were then shown that, unfortunately, Doral had managed to catch up to Alicia before she could reach the sword. Doral told her that this was the end as he called her the daughter of the sword master, but quickly retracted that statement and instead called her a fake hero. However, unexpectedly, a huge piece of rubble flew toward Doral, catching him off guard and sending him flying from the impact's force. It turned out that the one who threw that rock was Nellel, and after doing so, she shouted at Alicia to let her know she was supporting her. Alicia, in turn, gave her a smile and continued running toward the sword while saying that she was fine with being a fake. She added that she was fine with not becoming the real thing, while Rod noticed that the ice beneath them had begun to melt into water. Clem continued to listen as he looked at the now happy Luna, and Alicia added to her earlier words that even so, she was still a hero. When Alicia finally reached the sword, she stretched out her severed wrist and pointed toward it. Because of that, her hand began to move and shake the sword to pull it from the ground. When Dorel noticed this, it caught his attention. He saw her hand beginning to reattach to her wrist, making him think that she also had devil blood in her veins. After hearing everything Alicia said, Clem let out a quiet scoff, seemingly convinced by her words, though unwilling to admit it. Following that, after Alicia had fully reattached her hand to her wrist, she immediately unleashed Rising Dragon Altar, Rising Waterfall, and because of the melting ice they were standing on, the strike's power became even more effective, hitting Dorel solidly. It created a geyser-like effect due to the massive water discharge it produced, which visibly alarmed Rod, Tawara, and Nellel as they witnessed the scene. Dorel was completely engulfed by Alicia's devastating attack, and we can see the sheer ferocity in the hero's expression as she unleashed it. While watching the scene, Tawara questioned if Alicia had finally managed to defeat him, to which Rod anxiously answered no. He then explained to Tawara what was happening, and as he did, it was revealed to us that despite Alicia's massive strike, Dorel had still managed to guard against it, with only his bone dragon head hand taking damage. When Dorel turned to Alicia, we were also shown that she herself had been inflicted with a deep slash on her body, shocking everyone. Alicia then began plummeting from midair, causing Nellel to cry out in alarm. Tawara was in disbelief, wondering how that even happened since Alicia was the one who landed the cut on Dorel. Rod explained to her that Alicia's strike had been shallow. He pointed out that Dorel's sword managed to parry it and slash Alicia twice even before her hero's blow landed. And thanks to the treasure's power, those cuts had barely been visible. On Dorel's side, he commented as he watched Alicia falling, saying that this was the limit of a fake hero after all, someone unable to hope for anything and unable to fulfill anything. Preparing to strike again, he added that while he was surprised when the devil blood emerged in her, it turned out to be a needless worry. As Alicia continued to fall, she cleared her throat, catching Dorel's attention. She then said he was wrong, pointing out that the reason he could never fulfill anything, nor hope for anything, was because he himself set his own limits. And because he imposed his own limits, he could never be a hero. She told him not to make excuses about lacking qualifications or blaming the old legends. Annoyed by her words, Dorel yelled at her that she doesn't know when to shut up. Even so, Alicia, despite being severely weakened, wasn't fazed and told him to let her say something to him. She pointed out that her true aim from the start was his sword, catching his attention. Dorel turned toward his blade, only to be shocked when it suddenly shattered. The general was thrown into utter disbelief, screaming that it was impossible for such a thing to happen. Alicia replied that yes, it was impossible, but she had been hearing something strange this whole time. That strange sound every time their swords clashed, the faint scream coming from Dorel's blade. Dorel himself began questioning what that strange sound was, while Tawara suddenly realized something. She glanced over at the king's hammer and realized that her earlier strike had actually landed. Before Alicia finally hit the ground, she added that she simply thrust at the spot where she heard that faint scream, putting all her strength into it. Thankfully, Nellel was quick to react and rushed to catch her, successfully laying her down safely. After being set down, Alicia said she wondered what would happen to Dorel now. She pointed out that his entire body was made of devil blood, and the true owner of that devil blood was someone else entirely. She then teasingly asked how that owner would judge a man weakened by the breaking of his sacred treasure, which visibly unnerved and frustrated Dorel. Not long after, the effects of the shattered sacred treasure began to manifest, and Dorel's body started to disintegrate as the devil blood erupted from within him. His body gradually tore apart, starting with his hair and skin dissolving away. The area around the general was engulfed in a violent aura and spurting blood, and Tawara pointed out that his blood was now gushing out uncontrollably. Upon taking a closer look at Doral's grotesque form as it happened, Tawara remarked how gruesome it looked. Alicia agreed with him and added that she really did sever it easily, just as she expected, and said she knew it all along. Doral's internal organs and muscles also began to vanish as the devil blood was purged from his body, and as it happened, he muttered in disbelief that this couldn't be. He didn't want this to happen. He couldn't lose it, not when he hadn't accomplished anything yet. He kept repeating this to himself, recalling Margot before they fought the dragon. He said that he never wanted to see him end up like this, and that was why he had done everything he did. As that memory flashed in his mind, his body finally exploded and disintegrated completely, with Alicia watching it happen. His broken sacred weapon and several crystals that had been embedded in his body when he was still intact crashed onto the ground, which Rod immediately noticed. Rod quickly realized those were magic crystals, and the look of shock and unease on his face grew when he saw that 9 of them had been implanted in Doral's body earlier. Even so, as he gazed up at the sky where Doral's body vanished, he added that this should settle it for good now, and it should. In Alicia's thoughts, she agreed with Rod. Their battle against Doral was finally over, but she doubted that the owner of the devil blood he wielded, Devil Beast King Vortian, would simply back down because of this. As she worriedly anticipated what would happen if Vortian arrived under these circumstances, Clen appeared and said that he wouldn't come, pointing out that devil's blood by itself is not that powerful. Both Alicia and Nellel turned to him in surprise, calling out his name in relief upon seeing Luna safe with him. Alicia felt a wave of relief wash over her and thanked goodness that Luna was with him. Tawara, overhearing the name Luna, turned toward them in confusion. When she saw Luna happily reaching out toward Alicia, her eyes widened, and she muttered that it was her child. Hearing her voice, Luna turned toward her and immediately called out Mama. Tears welled up in Tawara's eyes from overwhelming joy upon seeing her child, and she dashed forward at full speed, dropping the king's hammer in the process. Her cry of "my son" caught Rod's attention, who was stunned to realize that she was Princess Tawara. Ignoring everything else, Tawara kept running. As she passed Alicia and Nellel, Nellel asked Alicia if she was really Luna's mother. Alicia confirmed it, pointing out that this was a mother and son reunion. With open arms, Tawara reached out for Luna as she approached him, but was suddenly stopped by Clen, who told her to stay there, freezing her in surprise and confusion. Even Alicia was shocked by what Clen did. Irritated, she got up and yelled at Clen, demanding to know what his problem was and telling him not to stop Tawara. Nellel quickly warned Alicia that she might aggravate her wounds if she kept moving. Clen then pointed out that this was the triumphant return of the king, saying the king would come back with his own power. Tawara was confused by what he meant, but soon it became clear as Clen set Luna down on the ground, letting him walk on his own. Luna looked back at Clen, and Clen added to his words earlier that the king would return with his own power, with dignity. Nellel was overjoyed when she saw Luna able to stand on his own, and Tawara's reaction was the same. After glancing briefly at Clen, Luna began trying to walk toward his mother. However, because he was still weak, his steps were wobbly, which worried Alicia. Clen reassured her that it was fine as Luna slowly regained his balance on his own, which filled Tawara with indescribable happiness. Clen added that a king never stops moving forward. Tawara cheered her son on, telling him he was almost there, while Alicia and Nellel joined in from the side, shouting that Luna could do it. Determination was evident on Luna's adorable face as he pushed himself to reach his mother, and soon enough, he succeeded, receiving a warm embrace from Tawara as she welcomed him back. Alicia and Nellel also shouted in joy at what Luna had accomplished, marveling at him. Clen allowed himself a faint smile upon seeing it, as though he felt a sense of pride, which prompted Alicia to comment with distaste that he shouldn't get carried away, since he was the one who attacked their castle and kidnapped the prince in the first place. After that, she just brushed it off and let her body collapse onto the ground, surprising Nellel. Smiling faintly, she commented that she was happy they managed to bring Luna back to that land. She then lost all her remaining strength, worrying Nellel even further, while Rod quickly ran toward her, asking if she was okay. Upon reaching her, Rod told her to get her wounds taken care of as soon as possible, but she assured him that it was fine and that the wounds she had sustained were not as deep as they looked. More importantly, he instructed him to inform the troops below about the death of Dorel, their general. Rod agreed, adding that they had to stop the war. He began running toward the battlefield, saying he would spread the word and apologizing to Nellel for leaving the situation to her, to which she nodded. After that, we saw Clen take the Book of Toa and state that he would keep it with him until they uncovered the truth. He placed it within his shadow, when suddenly, a gecko approached him from behind. We were then shown a close-up of the creature as it spoke, warning Clen that he would regret what he had done today, addressing him as Clevatess. It mentioned something about flames and declared that Toa's awakening was drawing near. Clen immediately restrained it with his shadow tentacles, coldly stating that he knew nothing about Toa, nor did he intend to learn from this gecko. With piercing eyes, he glared at it and declared it his enemy. After a tense stare down, the gecko turned into flames and vanished. Scoffing afterward, Clen remarked that for now, this war was over, but as he looked at the devastation left behind, he added that it seemed he still had much to learn about the human world. Meanwhile, we shifted to Rod, who had reached the area where the other soldiers were stationed. From beneath the rubble, Fabio managed to stand, confused about where he was. Rod's voice echoed through the area as he shouted that the war was over. At the same time, we saw Ney lying on a pile of hay, weakly asking if the battle was truly finished. At the outskirts of Hydrat, we also saw Guard observing everything from atop a dead tree. After witnessing it all, he transformed into his bird form and flew away. Moments after his departure, Eslin's reinforcements finally arrived, who was escorted by Mikkel. Upon their arrival, the troops began securing the area, while the general and the high priest accompanying them immediately approached the blood sphere, where Clevatess was sealed. As the general reached out to touch it, the high priest quickly warned him not to, explaining that the being inside was still alive and was likely choosing not to come out on purpose. The general then declared that they should restrict access to the entire visible area, forbidding anyone from approaching the blood sphere. Back in town, we saw several captured bullet troops in the hands of Eslin's reinforcements. Inside an inn where Clen's group was resting, Nellel tended to Alicia's wounds. After bandaging her, Alicia said she was glad she could move properly now, though the pain refused to fade completely. She pointed out that her stomach wound still hurt. This prompted Clen to explain that she had recovered from injuries that should have been fatal in an instant. So, of course, some pain still remained. Nellel marveled at her master's skill, while Clen clarified that it wasn't as powerful as when he healed her body before. He didn't stop the bleeding right away so as not to raise suspicion. He then added that from now on, they would keep that power a secret among themselves. Nellel immediately agreed, while Alicia asked what he thought about the story. He asked if she was referring to the one about true humans no longer existing and the unique beings who became the true heroes. When Alicia confirmed and asked if he thought it was real, Clen answered that he didn't know. He explained that what was certain was the name Toa, and the fact that the book influenced every generation of the King of Haydn. The truth, he said, was probably hidden within the hero legends, not the current ones, but the original source material. He added that the book he obtained came with a key, but the key didn't open the book. It fit in the slot, but he couldn't turn it. Alicia wondered if that meant the key belonged to another book, to which Clen replied that seemed like the most logical conclusion, and it wasn't something that could be forced open. He speculated there might be 2, 3, or even more books out there, and wondered how difficult it would be to find them. Suddenly, the door to their room swung open. Catching their attention, it was Fabio. Delivering his message, Fabio announced that Her Majesty, Queen Dowager Tawara, was waiting for them. Afterward, they proceeded to the Queen's throne room. As Tawara played with Luna, she commented that most of the castle was gone, but she was grateful the throne remained intact, and, more importantly, that their king was safe. She said the reason she summoned the 3 of them wasn't for anything else. The 3 of them, she declared, were the great benefactors of their kingdom, and she wished to thank them from the bottom of her heart. Addressing them as Lady Nellel, Sir Clen, and hero Alicia. She asked if they had any wishes, whether lands or titles. They need only speak of it, so long as it was within her power to grant. Clen questioned her offer of anything and said that in that case, he wished to become the king's magic tutor.